Last I checked my watch, it's January. The NASCAR playoffs don't begin until September, but I don't like to procrastinate. Today I'm going to tell you what 16 drivers will make the 2022 NASCAR playoffs. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove, a special episode. I do this around this time every year. Usually I wait until like the first week of February, but this week, the first week of February, there's the Busch Clash, the LA Clash. So this year I thought I'd get this out of the way a little sooner. Today, as I do every year, I will attempt to predict the 16 NASCAR Cup Series playoff drivers months in advance. Going in ice cold, I'm gonna attempt to make my case for every single driver, the ones I have making it in, the ones I have missing out. And I encourage you all in the comments to share your 16 driver playoff grids as well. Let's get to it. I take this very, very seriously because I have to live with these predictions for at least the next 8 months. Let's begin with some easy ones. First off, Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson's gonna make the playoffs this year. He won 10 races last season. He won the championship, obviously. He also led more laps than anyone in the 36 race schedule era. He's gonna make the playoffs easy peasy. Denny Hamlin as well. I know he only won 2 races this past season, but he was neck and neck with Larson at the top of the point standings all summer long. He's won multiple races in 6 of the last 7 seasons. He's also set a new career best average finish each of the past 3 seasons, so even as he hits his 40s, his career seems to be trending upwards. He'll make the playoffs easily this season. Kyle Busch is another easy choice. He was just 1 spot short of making it to the championship 4 a couple months ago. I think they'll be strong this year. Chase Elliott as well. He only won twice last year, both on road courses, but he did advance to his 2nd straight championship 4, so I think Chase Elliott makes it. Martin Truex Jr. made it to his 4th championship 4 in the past 5 seasons. He led Joe Gibbs Racing in wins a year ago. Cool, calm, and consistent. I expect Martin Truex Jr. to be one of the final 16 drivers. Let's throw in some Fords. Joey Logano. I know he only won 1 race last year, but last year was kind of a down year for Ford across the board. The Penske cars were better than the SHR cars for sure. Logano still made it to the round of 8. I expect him to make the playoffs this season. He was really good at all of the low downforce ovals last season. I looked it up. His worst finish last year was 13th at Darlington. 13th across 13 short ovals last year. Ovals that ran low downforce, higher horsepower, which every oval this year outside the super speedways with the next gen car will run. Remember, 670 horsepower and a 4-inch rear spoiler. Car's gonna drive differently than the Gen 6, but at least as far as horsepower and downforce are concerned, expect a little more horsepower and a little less downforce at all oval tracks, again, outside the super speedways this season. So I think that will lend itself nicely to Joey Logano's talents. He makes the playoffs. Kevin Harvick will also make the playoffs. Yes, he was winless last season, but he carried Stewart-Haas Racing. He still finished 5th in the final points. Yes, he's the oldest full-time driver in the NASCAR Cup Series, but he has not slowed down in recent years. He's been to 5 championship 4s. Championship 4s have only existed since 2014. He's been to more than half of them. He hasn't finished worse than 8th in points since 2009. Kevin Harvick may not dominate this year, but he's going to make the playoffs at the very least. I expect big things from William Byron this year as well. Last season he set career bests in nearly every major stat outside of pole awards. He won more poles back in his 2019 season, but he took a big step forward last season. Yeah, he was eliminated maybe early in the round of 12, but if not for him getting caught up in a crash at Talladega or getting punted by Tyler Reddick at the Roval, he probably makes it to the round of 8. I think Byron will easily make the playoffs this season. Ryan Blaney's an interesting one. 2021 was kind of a breakout season. He won 3 races, the most of his career, but all of his wins were at high downforce tracks, lower horsepower. He won Daytona at the end of the regular season. He won Michigan the week before that, won Atlanta earlier in the season. That version of Atlanta doesn't even exist anymore. And then the package at Michigan is going to look very different when we go there this summer compared to last year. So I still expect Ryan Blaney to make it into the playoffs without too much issue, but I'm less certain we'll see him back up his 3-win 2021 this year. I hope he does. I think he's a great driver. I think he's capable of it. The question will be, are the Fords a little bit better, and how does he adapt to the new next gen car? Will it suit his driving style? Most of his recent NASCAR wins have come with high downforce, high drag. I mean, he's such a great super speedway racer, but he has won with other rules packages in the past, so he's capable of it, but we'll have to see how the new car fits in this season, but he'll definitely make the playoffs. Alex Bowman will make the playoffs this season without too much issue. He won 4 races last year. Yes, this seems like a no-brainer, but he was probably the most inconsistent Hendrick Motorsports driver all season long. 15.1 average finish was worst on the team. But the reason I'd say he's probably a lock, look at where he won those races last year. 3 of his wins last year came at low downforce ovals. Dover, Martinsville, Richmond early in the season. Maybe my equation is flawed, but to me that gives at least some indication that Alex Bowman will be good this season. You know, the next gen car, and I should have said this at the beginning of this video, but the next gen is such a huge unknown. Every team from Hendrick to Rick Ware is getting the same car, the same exact chassis. Yeah, each manufacturer, each team is putting their own engine into it. They have their own people working on the car, obviously their own drivers, but at its root, every team is getting the same exact next gen car. I think that's going to even the playing field a bit. I do think some smaller teams like Spire, Petty GMS, maybe new teams like Colleague, I think they'll be a little more competitive this season. I don't know that I'm picking any of them to win the championship, but we could see 1 or 2 more of them sneak into the playoffs. Beyond just the competitive aspect of the new car, it's going to drive differently as well. I think some drivers will get a handle on it before others, and since we haven't seen any real on-track action besides, tests that, really are no serious indication, it's hard for me to predict who will be fast out of the gate, what teams will get a grasp of it faster than others, what drivers will thrive in the new car before others. It makes this video very difficult because this new car really throws a wrench into everything. I should have prefaced this video with that, but I'm saying it now, especially as we get to the end of this list, the final few spots to make up my top 16. It gets very competitive. I feel like few of us will disagree about my top 10. I think most people have those 10 making the playoffs without too much issue this year. It's 11 through 16, really 11 through like 25 that I think is really up in the air, kind of a huge unknown. So let's continue. This is where we may start to disagree more frequently. I've got Christopher Bell making the playoffs this season. He's in a Joe Gibbs Racing car, but like I just said, I'm not sure that's going to be worth quite as much in 2022. It's still worth something though. Bell was very hot and very cold in 2021. He won at the Daytona Road Course, the second race of the season. He was runner-up at Road America, second at New Hampshire, was closing fast in the final laps. But his average finish was kind of rocky, 15.8, which is like exactly the same average finish Eric Jones had in that car the year before. What sold me on Christopher Bell for this season were honestly his results on many of the short ovals last season. Again, it's a new car, huge unknown, so I'm looking for any sort of consistency I can find to make these predictions. And last year at the short ovals with low downforce, higher horsepower, Bell had some good runs. He was 3rd and 4th in the 2 Richmond races. He was 9th and 9th in the 2 Phoenix races, 7th at Martinsville. I mentioned the 2nd place at New Hampshire. All of those shorter ovals with less downforce. I think, in theory at least, he could adjust to the next gen car faster than maybe some other drivers and other teams will. So I think Christopher Bell will make the playoffs. At number 12, I've got Kurt Busch giving 23XI Racing their first playoff appearance. Toyota-backed team, Kurt Busch has won a race in 8 straight seasons. About half of that was with SHR, half of that was with Chip Ganassi, but it's really what he's done at Chip Ganassi the last 3 years that stands out to me. Round of 8 in 2020, made the playoffs all 3 years. Look, yes, 2021 was, I think, his worst statistical season of the 3. 15.5 average finish. He had a few less top 10s than the year before, but he was still solid. He still got a big win. He dominated that Atlanta race. I know that version of Atlanta doesn't exist on the schedule anymore, but still, Kurt Busch is a veteran. He's a former champion. 23XI showed some steady improvement throughout all of last season. I think Kurt Busch will be the icing on the cake. The bolt of electricity that team needs to be competitive. I think Kurt Busch will advance to the playoffs this season. Next up, Tyler Reddick will make the playoffs. 2021 was no sophomore slump for Reddick. Compared to his rookie season, he improved on nearly every major statistical category. From 9 top 10s to 16 top 10s, he had like a 17.5 average finish to a 15th place average. I think Reddick's going to take another step forward this year. Is going to excite some people. I think the next gen might help a team like Richard Childress Racing, who sort of lagged just behind the big guns for a few years now. Also, Reddick, kind of known for being able to control a more out-of-control race car. I think the next gen with a little higher horsepower, a little less downforce than the most recent Gen 6, at least on the big tracks, I think that will play to Reddick's favor. Now, he did spin out a few times during Charlotte testing recently, so perhaps he hasn't quite found the limits yet of the next gen, but I think he will. I think Tyler Reddick will excite a lot of fans this year and make the playoffs for the 2nd year in a row. Next up, Austin Dillon is going to make the playoffs this year. Austin Dillon always flies under the radar. I know he's not the most exciting pick in the world, but last year he set his career best in average finish. And most importantly, he showed serious serious improvement at road courses. I know it was a joke a couple of years ago that he'd never finished inside the top 15 at a road course. Well, last year he was 12th at Circuit of the Americas, 13th at Sonoma, 11th at Road America, 15th at the Glen, 15th at the Roval. He had a bunch of top 15s last year. I mean, didn't get any top 5s or any top 10s, but with a bunch of road courses on the 2022 schedule, once again, you gotta be at least competent at the road courses to survive the regular season. I think Austin Dillon proved he's capable of that last season. Next gen's supposed to handle a little better at road courses. Hopefully that plays to Austin Dillon's strengths. I think Austin Dillon will make the playoffs this year, even if he doesn't win a race. I think he'll be consistent enough to advance. Only 2 spots left. This is where things get really, really tough. A lot of new teams in the sport. Trackhouse added a second car. I know the Ganassi team disbanded. Well, sold to Trackhouse, but then Petty GMS adds a second car, the 42 car with Ty Dillon. Colleague has a full-time driver. 2311 now is a 2-car team. There are a lot of changes in this middle section of the pack that makes picking the final couple of spots very, very difficult. I'm going to do my best. 15th on my list, I've got Brad Keselowski. It's obvious that RFK, Roush Fenway Keselowski, is worse equipment than Penske, but like I said earlier, with the next gen, everyone receiving the same chassis, I don't think that gap will be quite as wide this year. An interesting stat on Brad Keselowski, we know he's a veteran, we know he's a former Cup Series champion, but he only has 1 winless season in his NASCAR Cup Series career, and it was his rookie season in 2010. Since 2011, he's won a race every single year. Usually wins a few races. 2021 was kind of an exception. It was also a lame duck season for most of the year, so I'm not going to hold that over him too strongly. I also think he has a decent crew chief on his pit box, Matt McCall, coming over from Chip Ganassi Racing, who's of course been with Kurt Busch the last 3 years, and I've just raved about Kurt Busch's performance at Ganassi. I think he'll be decent. At the very least, he's a veteran to match Brad Keselowski in that respect. So I think Brad Keselowski will drag Roush back into the playoffs this year. I don't know that he wins a race. He'll be good at the super speedways, as he always is. But I think he's a good enough driver to point his way in, if nothing else. So I think Brad Keselowski, in his first year as a driver owner, partial owner, will make the playoffs. All right, now we've made it to the end of my list. The final driver I have making the 2022 playoffs is, I will tell you in just a moment. First, I want to talk about some drivers that I don't think will make the playoffs this year, who will come up just a little bit short. There's a few obvious ones, like, I don't know, Justin Haley. I like Justin Haley a lot. I think he's super competitive, but first year team with Colleague. I mean, he has mostly a full year of Cup experience under his belt, but he's still really, really young. If he doesn't win a super speedway race, I don't think he makes the playoffs. But I say if, because I think there's a good chance he wins a super speedway race. His last 4, in fact, all 4 of his Xfinity Series wins have come at super speedways, including a win at Daytona last summer. So Justin Haley will be competitive. I just don't see him making the playoffs on consistency. He'd have to steal a win somewhere. Same goes for the Petty GMS guys. I like Eric Jones. I think he's a solid driver. I think he's an underrated super speedway racer. But if he doesn't win at a super speedway, I don't think he's getting in. Same goes for Ty Dillon. I think they'll be a little better this year than they were last year, but I don't think they'll be a playoff team. Guys like Corey LaJoie, I think will be a little better this year, but I don't expect playoffs. Michael McDowell, great story winning the Daytona 500 last year, but I don't think he makes it either. I gave that one a lot of thought though, because he was top 20 in points, I think, all of last season, and we know he's a good road racer, so I did give that one a lot of thought. I like Ricky Stenhouse Jr. I think the next gen will help a team like JTG Doherty out a bit, but I couldn't put him in there either. Daniel Suarez, Trackhouse, he had his moments last season. He's 30 years old, so he's a little older now, a little more experienced, but he didn't make the playoffs in a JGR car, didn't make the playoffs in an SHR car. I can't put him in the playoffs just yet. He would not be one of my first choices. Cole Custer, man, this is a big if. But if Cole Custer doesn't make the playoffs this year, I think we can start talking about a potential bust. Dude was dominant his last couple of years in Xfinity. I know he won in 2020, got that win at Kentucky on the final restart, made the playoffs that year, but if he didn't win that race, he would have been 24th in points. Last year, he was outside the top 25 in points all year long. I know SHR struggled last season, but he's clearly the 4th best driver on that team. If that happens again this season, I don't think they'll move off him anytime too soon, but I think fan support will start to dwindle. He'll become sort of just an afterthought in the Cup Series, which would really be a shame. There's also a ton of rookies this season. Austin Cindric with Team Penske, Harrison Burton over there with the Wood brothers, Todd Gilliland with Front Row. I'm not picking any of them to make the playoffs. Not even Austin Cindric, who's in a Penske car, the 2 car. He might prove me wrong. I mean, he's a great road course racer. We know that. There are a few road courses on the schedule. Heck, he led some laps at road courses last year on a part-time basis, so he could prove me wrong, but just about every year I do this, I pick a rookie or 2 to make the playoffs, and every year they disappoint me. Like last year I picked Chase Briscoe. Other than Indy Road Course, he was nowhere close to sniffing the playoffs last season. So I just can't bring myself to pick a rookie this season. But if I were to pick one, it would probably be Austin Cindric. I think he's in the best car with the best team. And I think compared to Harrison Burton and Todd Gilliland, both of which are not Cup Series ready in my opinion, Austin Cindric probably is. Dude was a bump and run away in November from being a back-to-back NASCAR Xfinity Series champion. He's young, he's matured a lot the last few years, he's improved on the track the last few years. I think Austin Cindric is Cup Series ready. I'm happy to see him with Penske. I think that'll be a great place for him. I think he'll be successful there in his career, but I'm not ready to pick him to make the playoffs in his rookie season. I just can't do it. I cannot pick a rookie this season. I'm sorry. So who's left? Bubba Wallace, Chris Buescher, Eric Almirola made the playoffs this year. Chase Briscoe, I just mentioned him. Ross Chastain, BJ McLeod, technically, I think. He's racing full-time, probably. Team has a charter at least. Anyway, I have to pick one to fill out my 16-driver playoff grid. I went back and forth on this for a long, long time. I'm going with Ross Chastain, the Watermelon Man. He gets it done. He was 20th in points last season for Chip Ganassi Racing. Not terrible, but not great either. But it was how he ran late in the season at a few tracks. Like he was 3rd at Darlington in the playoffs. He was 7th at Richmond in the playoffs. Was also 8th at New Hampshire late in the summer. It's not just how good he was at some of the short ovals last season, but it was also how good he was at some of the road courses. 4th at Circuit of the Americas, 7th at Sonoma, 7th at Road America, 12th at Watkins Glen also. Those are pretty solid finishes for a Chip Ganassi driver. His first year with Chip Ganassi in the Cup Series. Like I've said about a few teams, I think Trackhouse, a smaller, newer team, will be one of those who benefits most from the next-gen car, at least from a competitive standpoint, so I think that will help Ross Chastain's chances. The biggest complaint about Ross Chastain is that he's over-aggressive at times, and absolutely, he is. He still is. But the modern points format is a bit more forgiving if you're over-aggressive and wreck a lot early in the season. I mean, one, they let 16 cars, 16 drivers in, that's a lot, but two, if you just nab a win somewhere, you don't have to worry about any sort of points. I'd like to see Ross Chastain dial back the intensity a little bit more. I think his cars will be pretty consistently competitive this season, so he won't have to reach out and try to grasp something that isn't there. If he dials back that aggression just a tad, I think Ross Chastain makes the playoffs this year, his first year with Trackhouse. Which means there are a few high-profile drivers I have missing the playoffs. Eric Almirola, lame duck season. He's already announced this is his last season as a full-time NASCAR driver. Last year was such a struggle. If he doesn't win New Hampshire, he comes nowhere close to the playoffs. I don't see him pulling that one out this year, so I think Almirola misses. Chase Briscoe, another one who I think will have a great shot, especially at some of the road courses, but outside the Indy road course, he was also not competitive last year. Hopefully SHR is better as an organization, and that gives him a chance, but I'm not willing to bet on it at this point. I paused when looking at Chris Buescher's name because last year he did have an average finish of 17.3, career best. 19th in points, Brad Keselowski coming over now, some shakeups over there at RFK. Like, there's reasons to be optimistic about Chris Buescher's chances this year, but I just couldn't bring myself to vault him ahead of Brad Keselowski, his teammate and partial boss, or Ross Chastain in a Trackhouse car. So I have Buescher barely missing, and Bubba Wallace. I know he got a win last season, but it was late in the season. He didn't advance into the playoffs because of it, and it was a rain-shortened win at Talladega. Still deserved the win, completely earned it, but outside of the super speedways last season, we didn't see any type of consistency from the 23 car. A lot of that was, a new team trying to figure each other out, figure things out, how to be competitive, how do we win? But some of that I think was on Bubba Wallace. I think Bubba Wallace, as I've said all along, is a competent enough driver, but is he a top driver? Is he top 10 in NASCAR? Absolutely not. Is he really anywhere close to breaking into that top 10? No, not at this point, but he's serviceable. I think you can make the playoffs with Bubba Wallace. You just can't win a championship with him as he is right now. And I do think Kurt Busch coming over will be a benefit to him. I think he will make Bubba Wallace a little bit better, but there are a lot of competitive teams. Again, about 12th through 25th on the grid. There are a lot of very competitive teams. I don't think both 2311 cars will make the playoffs this year. I just don't think there's room for them. Not with Brad Keselowski at Roush, or with Colleague having a full-time driver, or Trackhouse expanding to a two-car team. There's just not enough room for both 2311 cars. I'm going to go with the veteran past champion who's overachieved at Ganassi the last 3 years, as opposed to Bubba Wallace, who was okay last year, improved a little bit throughout the year, got that win at Talladega, but never showed consistent playoff capable speed. I will go Kurt Busch over Bubba Wallace, at least at the start of this season. There you have it, folks. Those are the 16 drivers I have making the 2022 playoffs. Leave a comment down below. Do you agree with what I said about your favorite driver? How do you feel about my 16 driver grid? I feel pretty good about the top 10. I don't think most people will argue with the top 10. It's 11 through the rest that the debate really gets spicy, gets heated. Leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you're new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future NASCAR uploads. Also, a huge thank you to my amazing Patreon supporters. I couldn't do this show without your tremendous support. I greatly appreciate it. Lots more to talk about this week. I've got a couple other videos planned, so I will see you all again very soon. Have a good one, y'all. Thanks for watching.